Joining us today is a superb aviator and co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, and a commercial drone operator. Currently, he's a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employers, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his fortress of isolation, where he's thawing out, where he just returned from a 3-day trip where he battled a nor'easter weather event. From somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, help me in welcoming back to the show, Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. How you guys doing?
Doing great, man. Doing great. So, you actually did some flying this week. Tell me about it.
I did. I got to go to a town or a state or a city that I haven't been to before, believe it or not. Portland, Maine. I haven't been there. I even lived in New England for, I don't know how many, 15 years, and I never made it up to Maine. And so this was the first time up there, and coincidentally, there was a nor'easter, as we say it, going through the area. So it was pretty wintry up there, snow and wind, and temperature's only down to about 28 degrees, but that's different from Texas. We're up in the high 50s, low 60s right now. So yeah, I was shivering in my boots for sure.
Did you have to de-ice at all?
Oh yeah. There was plenty of de-icing going on. The next morning, we spent the night, so the kickoff flight got out there, and the plane got in pretty late at night. I think it got in about 10:30, and at that time, the storm had pretty much pushed out, so there wasn't any snow accumulation on the plane, but it was pretty obvious that they encountered icing conditions on the approach, because the flaps were left down at 15, which is one of our procedures if we encounter icing on the approach. And when I did the walk around, the nose and the leading edges were all frosted up or iced up. They weren't frosted or iced up. So, yep, we had to get the ice, remove all that ice, and we're on our way back to Charlotte the next morning.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Rob, I think you have your background image still green screen thing, because the pictures behind you are sparkling, and I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't figure it out.
Looks like Christmas. Oh no, that's the nor'easter going on up there in the that's the effect we got going.
like Harry Potter at his house, man. The pictures are moving.
I thought it was Ghost House or something.
I'm going to try to fix that while we're talking, though.
Well, you had a pretty
cool,
exciting adventure there, going through some weather and having to go through de-icing procedures. Something that, I was based in Chicago off and on for 13 years. De-icing is absolutely something that was part of my normal routine, and I wasn't very intimidated by it. But I haven't had to do it in a long time. I think I've de-iced once this season. So I've been lucky, I guess. And so to hear now, when someone I know goes through the de-icing procedures, I'm always I'm like, oh yeah.
This was my second time, so I've been pretty lucky myself. I've been able to avoid some of the colder climates, at least some of the storms or having to wake up in a climate that's cold and frosty. So this is only the second time, but they made it really easy to do with the Hot app, that we have on our EFBs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is such a modern advancement in our procedures from what we used to have at Sandpiper. You had to reference those cards and, find it, keep that card in the book and make sure you have the current card for the year or whatever. Now it's just all in the app. You just click on the app, open it up. It automatically knows what airport you're at, and you just have to enter the nose number, and voila, it does everything for you.
Yeah.
So it's pretty nice.
And I'm really happy that Legacy Airlines has developed that technology. And I think that maybe in a future show, we should probably dedicate some time on explaining what de-icing procedures are like when you're working at an airline operator, and how it differs from, say, a private or a charter operator. Speaking of private operators, Also here to help me to get Flight 70 of the Squawk Ident Podcast underway today is another exceptional aviator and co-host. He is an award-winning trophy-hoisting tennis champion, a professional CFI IIMEI flight instructor, a former freight dog, a former airline pilot, a current King Air flight instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, a captain, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us from his chateau, where he just got back from a 3-day event himself, where he had adventures all over Arizona. From somewhere in San Diego, California, here he sits in his freshly painted oasis of chaos. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Roger, how you doing?
Oh, I'm just living the dream down here. Living the dream. How about you, Tony?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm in the middle of a trip. Anybody that can watch the video that'll be later posted on YouTube as a promo clip. You can see that my background is the hotel room here in Boston. So we'll get more into that here in just a moment. But you've been getting a lot of stuff done around the house, keeping up with the kids' online education, and you've also been doing some flying. Now, you've told me that your flying was pretty mediocre and nothing too exciting, but you have a trip coming up that is something to be a little bit envious of. You're going to be heading out to the Caribbean for a few days? What?
Well, I don't really think anyone's going to be envious of this particular trip because I'm not actually staying in the Caribbean.
Oh no.
So I actually need to airline all the way back so that I can fly several other trips before airlining back out there in order to bring them home. It's, I'm not looking forward to, I leave for that on next Tuesday, and I'm not looking forward to the next week and a half after that. It's going to be pretty ugly, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah. And so, that's another thing that it's kind of like for us, deadheading, so a lot of people say, well, what's a deadhead? Okay, so an airline pilot, they might start a trip and in 4 days fly 6 flights where they operate every single one of them, and they do this roundabout around the country and end up back at their base on their final leg. Sometimes they don't need you to fly a leg, so they do what's called deadheading, where you have a seat in the cabin and a positive space seat, and they basically transport you from point A to point B, where you're sitting in the back like a passenger. And that's called a deadhead because it's a positive space. You're still working. You're actually part of the crew. You're just not operating the aircraft. Well, for you, when you say, I have to airline out, you fly the owner's aircraft into a destination, and then sometimes you're flying into an airport that's not the international airport or the main airport, and you got to jump into transportation of some kind, get on over to the main airport or the commercial airport, and then fly out on an airline back to wherever they need you to fly the very next leg. And yeah, I can see how that can be a little annoying.
It's going to be one of those things. I was looking at it, and I haven't really gotten into it yet, but it's one of those where am I? Where is the airplane? The other airplane? Where is my car? Kind of thing, because it's going to be a mess. It's just going to be a mess. Unfortunately, we don't deal with this all too often, but just the confluence of an airplane flying out and staying in the Caribbean. And then, but we have another 2 airplanes. Both those other airplanes are flying, and so we need all the pilots back. But when we fly out of one airport, but I got to airline back into the international airport, kind of like what you're just talking about, and we've got one airplane at a different airport than where I flew out of. It's going to be a headache, and I'll just kind of leave it at that for right now.
Planes, trains, and automobiles, my friend.
It's gonna be a mess.
Uber.
I'm looking for. I'm just enjoying these last few days off before that starts.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that it'll go by very smoothly for you. And thank you again for being here. Well, as we see here on the bottom of our screen, and for those listening on the audio portion, we're very excited, as we mentioned in the intro to the show today, that we have a returning special guest, Mr. Tony Zollo. and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you back to the show. Tony is an avid fisherman, a Grady White boat skipper, a culinary angelou, a wicked YouTuber, voted the North Shore Boston Zamboni Driver of the Year 3 times in a row, and a former Embraer 145 driver for the airline we affectionately call Sandpiper. He's a Boston native and currently a 737 driver for a major U.S. carrier that we here on the show call TransGlobal. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Mr. Tony Z. Anthony, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Tony?
I'm doing okay. So, last time we were on the show together, you told me anytime you're in Boston, let me know. We'll get together, we'll go out, we'll hang out, and I'll show you, my stomping grounds. And I was so excited. I had a double Boston layover last night and tonight, and kind of reached out to you and said, hey, well, let's get together if you don't mind, and we can record a show. And, schedules, how they work out, but I'm very happy that your schedule kind of changed the last second, and tonight you were able to join us. And we thought a little bit about it, and we thought, well, for social distancing reasons and the fact that, we're both flying airplanes here in the next, for me tomorrow and for you in a couple of days, probably best to just do this over Zoom. So here we are. Recording the show. I just want to say thank you for being here. And what's been going on with you? How's the flying been going, and how's life?
So the flying's been few and far between. So I think the last time that I was on the show, we talked a little bit about the short-term LOA, or short-term in the sense it's maximum duration 2 years. Hopefully it will be a lot sooner than that based upon some exit triggers with it. But as part of that LOA, the seniority level that I'm at, we're taking a pretty big hit in terms of basically credit hours. So we're at the point where, my level of seniority, our credit hours are only guaranteed at 35. Some people are averaging maybe a little bit higher than that, but that's basically where I fall. So it's almost like working half a month is really what it is. So the new payroll protection plan is supplementing the difference here near term for that. But not just working half schedule, and in the meantime, just kind of hanging out at the house, watching the dog, and just trying to stay healthy, stay fit, get to the gym, be productive, spinning up my side business. I've been busy with that, trying to grow my social media footprint. Not an easy thing to do, as I'm sure you're well aware. I've spent the past week and a half or so trying to figure out the intricacies and nuances of Instagram. So that's a whole mystery to me right now. But basically that, and then flying the odd trip here and there. Yeah.
And, hats off to you. I see the website's been developed, and now you've got the YouTube channel is starting to ramp up, and so congratulations, man. I really, my hat's off to you. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, no, thank you. It is. Rome wasn't built in a day. 2 days, but good things take time.
Yeah, and we are talking about Life by Z. So on Instagram, YouTube, and whatnot, just do a search for Life by Z, and you'll find Mr. Zollo's motivational.
I'll take that.
What's that?
Yeah, I'll take that a step further. It's there's a Facebook group, Life by Z. There's also Instagram, Life by Z, as well as lifebyz.com, and my YouTube channel under the same heading. But stop on by and check it out. Basically what I'm doing is personal consulting, just trying to help people figure things out, get organized, stay on track, accomplish things, sort of guide them in the right direction. And that's what I'm doing. So one little step at a time here, and building the client base, building the following, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, congratulations on that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show as well. So for myself, I realized I was listening to some of the older episodes, and I realized I always ask you guys what's going on, and I don't really kind of dive into what I've been doing. I just kind of mention it as we go. So for myself, I have been flying quite a bit. January, I had about 2 weeks off towards the end of January, and I took that opportunity, as we've mentioned before in the podcast, to help Roger out a little bit, and I started diving into my remodel jobs that I've been putting on hold. As we mentioned in the last podcast, I've been using COVID as an excuse to not swing a hammer, but man, Home Depot loves me. We've been stocking up with a garage full of all kinds of things from vanities to light fixtures to shower surrounds and bathtubs and things like that. And so, yeah, coming up here in about 2 weeks, I've got a vacation coming up, and in those a week and a half of days off, I will be knee deep in home renovations. So that's what I've been doing. Like I mentioned earlier, the trip that I'm on is a nice 3-day. It was Los Angeles direct to Washington, DCA, Washington Reagan. Pilots, by the way, a little side note, do not call Reagan International Airport. That is, unless you want to be put into a holding pattern for 20 minutes while you think about what you've done. Because ATC controllers are not very fond of the actions that former President Ronald Reagan took against the controllers when they were trying to strike and talk about fair wages, and basically replace them all. And that's the short of it. But so whenever you're listening to whatever you are, ATC Live, ATC, or whatever you're listening to, or if you have a scanner of your own or what have you, the pilots never call Reagan International Reagan. They say Washington Tower, Washington Ground, for that reason. And ask me how I know. Because when I was a new first officer at a regional airline, and I'm reading the chart, and at the top, and I look on the right-hand corner of the JEP chart of the approach plate, and it says Reagan International. So I said, Reagan Tower, this is so-and-so, Sandpiper 123, we're on it. And the controller, in a female voice, she goes, Reagan Tower, huh? And the captain looks at me and goes, dude, what did you do? She's like, well, and then he cues up the mic right away and goes, he's new. And she's like, oh, well, we'll let that slide. You're clear to land, runway 19. I was like, oh, thank God. What did I do? And then after we landed, he explained the whole thing, and I had no idea. So yeah, so straight leg the DCA, and then aircraft swap from the Neo, the 321 Neo, jumped into an old 319, and went on up to Boston. Relatively quick flight. I think we landed 30 minutes ahead of schedule, which pretty much meant we kept getting shortcuts all the way. It was kind of nice to cross over JFK and LaGuardia at 25,000 feet and look down on a beautiful clear night after a storm had passed through a day or two before, and just to see all the streets covered in white and the lights and everything. It was just beautiful. So yeah, Boston last night, and then this morning I did the DCA Boston shuttle. Left Boston this afternoon, late afternoon, went down to DC, had a pretty quick turn of it, and exchanged captains. So the captain I was flying with was pretty much done, so he went home, and then I had another captain who was deadheaded into DCA from LA earlier in the day, and then we flew one leg back to Boston, and here I am at the beautiful Westin Hotel. A really wonderful place, downtown Boston. The ride in from the airport was beautiful. I did what I think most flight crews should do more of, and they've gotten away from it, because you get in a van with your entire flight crew and every single face is illuminated as they're staring down into their lap at their phones, and they forget to look outside and see how beautiful this destination could be on the drive. And so I kept my phone in my pocket, and I just kept looking out the window, and man, some beautiful architecture out here, and the history, the museums. I'd love to just stay out here for a while and visit some great locations and really dive into the history of this place. So, Anthony,
no shortage of that around there.
What's that?
Yeah, there's no shortage of that around there.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you live in a beautiful place, Anthony. I got to tell you. Well, let's get started with the show. Today we have a pretty heavy schedule of items that we're going to try to get to, and hopefully we can get to all of them. From the Dallas Morning News, in an article that I came across just yesterday by Kyle Arnold, dated February 3rd of 2021, entitled, American Airlines will send out 13,000 new furlough notices to employees on Friday. Well, that was this morning. With demand stagnating and more government relief uncertain, the Fort Worth-based carrier plans to furlough workers again on April 1st. In a letter from CEO Doug Parker and President Robert Isom, they indicated that as we closed out last year with the successful extension of the payroll support program, we fully believed that we would be looking at a summer schedule where we'd be flying all of our airplanes and need the full strength of our team, they said. Regrettably, that is no longer the case. The warnings don't mean furloughs are certain, but are intended to alert employees who could temporarily lose their jobs. The airlines union's employees have recall rights, but it could be several months until demand is significant enough to justify bringing workers back. The article goes on to say that Parker and Isom said that the company's passenger traffic will be down 45% during the first 3 months of this year, and based on current demand outlook, we will not fly all of our aircraft this summer as planned. The TSA data shows that the number of passengers flying out of the U.S. in airports is still down by more than 60% from a year ago. And also, United Airlines has issued 14,000 furlough warnings to its employees, while the Dallas-based Southwest Airlines said it won't furlough any employees or cut wages this year. It is offering voluntary leaves and early retirement to workers in an effort to trim costs. American and other airlines are now pinning hopes on an upcoming stimulus program being negotiated by federal lawmakers that will again include help for airlines. And the article will be posted in the show notes here. It goes on with a lot more data about who's getting furloughs and the union's responses. But I got to tell you, when I read this, I thought, oh crap, here we go again. You know,
me too.
Another bad year. I had no idea if I was going to be affected, how deep this was going to go, and how many pilots were going to be affected by that 13,000 number. At Legacy Airlines, the sister company here, we've been dealing with this same thing. And I know that TransGlobal has kind of been issuing some of these warn letters that the media is not talking about as well, right, Anthony?
So my understanding of that, and I could be wrong in this, you just said 14,000 a minute ago, which I'm not going to doubt or discredit that. The number sounds a little bit high, but we had a lot of flight attendants, for example, that were furloughed, but now under this latest payroll protection program, they have to bring those flight attendants back. Right. So, where that's only going to be a temporary, measure that's going to get them through, at least as things stand right now, not barring basically, a CARES 3.0, so to speak, that would only go through the end of March. So I would imagine that those furlough notices are sort of baked into the cake, if you will, if that makes any sense. And again, that's just an assumption, my understanding of it. So yeah, I mean, that's really the only thing I can kind of, comment on intelligently or even semi-intelligently at this point.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. The same over at American and at Legacy Airlines as well. That they're the pilots and that's cumulative, all the employees, not just the pilots and the flight attendants and whatnot, but throughout all the labor departments, those were the numbers. And
okay, that would make more sense then.
Yeah. So by that logic, what was going to happen was there were pilots that have been waiting to get back on the line as demand would increase. Right now, they're payroll protected, so they're basically staying at home, collecting a minimum monthly guarantee of sorts, and they're not flying. And they're waiting for their class date to go get requalled, do their landings, whatever they had to do, go back to the base where they were and get back on the line, whether that be reserve or whatnot. And before that can happen, because of the projections, now they're having to give out these warn letters, as we've spoken about in previous shows, legal responsibility of the company after an idea of a mass layoff. They have to give 60, or in some cases like New York, 90 days notice to the employees that are affected that, hey, you may get laid off. So these pilots especially are feeling like, wait a minute, just when I thought I was coming back, now you're announcing you're going to give warn letters again. So it's this seesaw effect of stress and anxiety.
Yeah,
and that's the
stress.
Unstable part of the job.
The thing is this, when you talk about this whole COVID thing, and we're almost a year into it now. I mean, certainly when this thing first went down, my rational, level-headed, sort of part of me, looked at things and said, all right, hey, this is going to be a lean year, where the airlines are going to lose money. It's not going to be good. We'll come out of this, will be okay. But, like I said, the rational, level-headed part of me never would have thought that this thing would have stretched out to what it's gone through. And when you try to apply logic and reason to a lot of things with this, again, not to be repetitive, but like the logical, rational, reasonable part of me that's looking at this going, oh yeah, this will happen. That'll happen. You're not seeing all those things happening. Moral of my story here is that you can't apply logic and reason to this. So with that being said, my disclaimer here, logic and reason makes me think, well, okay, let's wait and see what happens this summer. As the vaccines come out, people will get the vaccines, more people will start traveling. The big thing is foreign countries opening up their borders to incoming international travel. Again, the rational part of me likes to think that that's what's going to happen, and that will level the playing field, to basically normalcy, if you will. But I don't know. When you apply logic and reason to this thing, right from the start, that sort of seems to be out the window. So anybody's guess. Who knows? It could be as dark as they predict. Could be the polar opposite of that. I mean, it's just that much of a crapshoot.
Yeah. And Rob, you were flying just recently. What were people saying about this announcement?
Well, mainly I just had conversations with the captain. The flight attendants that were working our flights are, as you can imagine, they're very senior, just because, all the junior ones, like you just talked about, are sitting at home, collecting the PSP money. So the captain has been with us for over 30 years already. He came to the 7-3 fleet from flying the 787 and the 777. So he said he was furloughed for about 2 years at one point. And in conversation with him about this, I mean, he was so far removed from the whole situation, because it really doesn't affect him other than, how he bids, what overnights he's going to go to and stuff like that. So it was kind of, he was curious as to what I thought. And, I don't know very much about it. Obviously, I mean, I know that, the warn letter came out and we talked about that. And I told him, how many pilots they were looking at warning. And it was 1,850. And, he asked me right away, hey, are you in that? And I said, well, I checked, no, but you never know how they count that stuff, because we have so many different seniority numbers based on date of hire and, just relative seniority, people out on mill leave and all that stuff. So it's really hard to really figure out which number you need to go by. But long story short is, thankfully, I'm not like you are, like you're not, I'm not. So that's kind of the conversation, how it went. Talked to another buddy of mine, a fellow West Winder. Tailwinder, and he was thankful that we weren't in that situation either. So
yeah. And Roger, we've talked about how you've really kind of dodged the bullet, because just a year ago we were talking about letters of recommendation and dusting off your resumes and getting your online apps out there, because you were thinking, it's time for me to join the club and head on over to the airline industry. I think maybe this is a good time to do it. You saw the projections with hiring and everything, and then this happened. And we were talking the other day how, man, you really dodged a bullet here.
Fortunately, I am undesirable.
Well, don't say that.
Roger, we're talking about aviation, Roger. We're talking about flying.
I am aviation-wise undesirable. And it's been the greatest gift I could have gotten.
Oh, okay,
that's just kind of, I guess the luck of the draw for all intents and purposes. I am not nearly as affected as you guys are.
Yeah.
it's definitely affected things, but the security of my job has never really been threatened. So I feel extremely fortunate about that. And also that, like you were saying, I mean, who could have seen this coming? And looking at all the legacy carriers and their projections and everything,
Yeah.
who wouldn't look at the opportunities that they were offering? But you you can't make this stuff up,
Crazy.
My favorite
You know,
meme
you know
right
what?
now.
If I may interject, not really interject, but bring this up. You know what's throwing things off for me personally, and I enjoyed seeing the news and I thought it was great. But you see these other companies saying, "Hey, we're going to start hiring again." Like I forget, was it Spirit?
Spirit,
Or,
Frontier,
Frontier,
yeah.
and all these other airlines. So I'm like,
United said they
sweet,
were gonna hire.
Yeah, I see all that stuff. So, I'm not sure if it's just like a, kind of the delay in things on how the, the news gets out of the PR world of the airline office there. But, I'm sure there's a little bit of cavitation that goes along with the announcement. And then we're going, well, yeah, the projections look good 2 weeks ago, but now they suck, So,
Well, I
But
think
that's the thing.
there's truth to
The industry.
fact that this is a strategy, and there's truth to
Yeah.
the fact that some of this, with the warning letters going out or warn letters going out today and a couple days ago with other major airlines, it's, I think, a way to get the political spectrum out there to pay attention to the airlines, so that when they're writing legislation to pass more stimulus, which is, no matter how you look at it, depending on what side of the aisle you may participate in, or
Yeah.
what kind of financial goals you think our country should be going in, stimulus, the more stimulus you put out, the more in debt and the less value
Well,
when you print money.
I also feel it's not so much just for that. I think it's just another way of putting pressure on the government and local governments and everything like that, just to open up the economy. Because yeah, we're talking about PSP stimulus money and all that stuff, but what really needs to happen is the world just needs to open up again, and it needs to start right here in hometown USA. So a lot of these people live and work in these towns that especially some of the hubs that TransGlobal and Legacy have. A lot of these hubs are shut down because of the way their local or their city or their state governments are running things. And you cross right over the border to another state, and they're doing just fine. They're making ends meet, and I wouldn't say they're doing just fine, but their businesses are open, people are working, kids are going to school,
And yet their numbers are dropping in terms of infections. Infections and whatnot. So yeah, I think this is all kind of a strategy. At the same time, you're right. Like, the projections on one week might be different than the projections in the other. And as the news comes out about vaccine rollout being slower in some states than others, I've found out recently that it depends on what state you live in. If you live in Nevada, they're on 1B, transportation workers. They're going out and getting vaccines. But if you live in California, even though 1B is the next one to go, they're still not done with the essential workers, 1A. So depending on the state you live in, North Carolina being another one, Arizona being another one, you could be getting your first round of vaccinations right now as a transportation worker. But in other states, you can't, because they're still behind and they're not where they need to be. So yeah, this is very much a state-by-state issue. I think that the airlines are having the strategy in order to put pressure on Congress to get them more relief, more money in the stimulus program. And speaking of that, the question really is, will CARES 3.0 be helping payroll protection? From CNBC, an article published just yesterday by Leslie Josephs, airline laborers unions push for a third round of federal aid with travel demand still depressed. This article was interesting because it said American Airlines and United Airlines have warned some 27,000 employees cumulatively that they could be furloughed. The travel demand remains low, and slow rollout of the vaccines have dashed hopes for recovery. The second round of federal payroll aid expires after March 31st. So they go on to say how, the current round of aid at $15 billion expires on the 1st, and these airlines, said, hey, we could be potentially laying off 27,000 jobs. So maybe it's time that we get the CARES Act 3.0 passed so that we can keep these people out of the unemployment line and keep them working. And I think it worked, because after I landed here in Boston tonight, I did a quick scrolling of the news feed and found out that this morning they actually passed the new stimulus, the Biden-Harris stimulus plan, in the Senate on a 51-50 vote, and it made history because it was a tie, and the tiebreaker in that situation is the vice president. So Vice President Harris was the tiebreaker to 51. So what does this mean? Well, we don't have the verbiage in front of us. We don't have the outline of the bill, and it still has to go through the House of Congress, which they had a separate bill that they had passed. So now we have until about mid-March, according to this article, for all the details and the amendments to this bill to get in there. The question is, will this include a new payroll protection for airlines? And with this budget resolution nearly complete, Congress can now turn in earnest to writing Biden's expansive pandemic relief proposal into law and push it through the Senate without Republican votes, if necessary, under the special rules unlocked by budget legislation. That process will take weeks, with Democrats eyeing mid-March as the deadline for final passage of the relief legislation, because that is when enhanced unemployment benefits will expire if Congress doesn't act fast. And as we mentioned, a senior U.S. lawmaker told reporters at Reuters that the COVID-19 relief package, the 3.0 package, would include a new round of payroll assistance for U.S. airline workers. Representative Peter DeFazio, who chairs the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, told reporters at the White House that the new round of airline government assistance would extend restrictions on executive compensation and stock buyouts. The U.S. airlines have been awarded $40 billion in payroll since March, and airline unions last week asked Congress for another $15 billion to keep the thousands of workers on the payroll past March 31st. So until probably here in the next few days and hours, we'll see what this entails. Maybe those warn letters will go out and the zero furloughs will happen.
Possible. Could be rescinded.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. What do you guys?
The other thing too, and I think last time that I was on, we touched on this, is that oftentimes with situations like this, there sort of becomes this stigma that the airlines are getting bailed out. Man, the airlines are on the hook to pay all that money back. And we've talked about this before. It happened, happened after 9/11, and it's going to happen here again. This money isn't free money. This money is getting paid back. This is think of this as like bridge loan. This is just, here you go. Don't worry about it. I mean, that's the reality of this. So even once the airlines start actually getting back, into profitability, let's just say, what do you think is going to happen with that profitability? It's going to go to pay down debt. So even though they're going to start making money, they're not really going to be actually cash positive here for quite some time. So that's the reality of the matter. It's not a freebie. That money's being paid back.
Now, when you say that the airlines are going to be paying back, what do you mean? I remember you gave us some detail about that the last time you were on the show.
I mean, all this money. I mean, it's not like this is just hey, here you go. Don't worry about it. I mean, this money is going to be paid back. Like 9/11.
Yeah, here's $1.9 billion, man. Go ahead, just take it.
Right.
Thanks. Yeah. We love you guys.
Yeah, and after 9/11, a lot of people said, they said the same type of thing. Look at this, the airlines are getting bailed out. No, the airlines are getting bailed out. I mean, it was basically, the reality of the matter is, okay, look, if you don't step in and do something, and this is talking about 9/11, we're going back quite a ways. Had there not been some sort of intervention on behalf of the government at that particular point, basically we wouldn't have had an air transportation industry left. Okay, we would have had nothing. So they were compelled to have to do something in that particular case, which they did. But the airlines paid that money back. They paid it back actually ahead of schedule and even with interest too. So the reason I mention this is just that I think that there's oftentimes when you talk about these types of things, it's this, oh yeah, look at all these corporate bailouts, all these big corporations getting money. And well, keep in mind, they're getting money. There's a reason why they're getting it. If you let them go insolvent, there's the unemployment factor, but there's also the national interest to the country. How are we going to have an air transportation system? Okay. And at the same time, too, where it's essential, you need it. Okay. Again, those companies are still paying that back. And the point that I was trying to make, not to be repetitive, is that even once these companies do start turning a profit, they're still going to be in the situation where they have to pay that money back. So the reality of airlines being truly profitable, cash positive profitability, that's still going to be quite some time, even once they stop hemorrhaging the money that they're already losing right now. And obviously for selfish reasons, I want to see this go through. But the reality of the matter is, as a country, we can't just keep on printing money. We got to start really evaluating that. I mean, 1, possibly 2 rounds of this, okay, but pressing up on the third, there's that part of me as it's just a U.S. citizen that says, oh, okay, I don't want anyone to lose their job, but we can't devalue our currency and live off a credit card debt, which is effectively what we're going to be doing on a larger economic scale here.
Yeah. And that's really the scariest part of this, I think, is that we keep doing this. I, too, am selfish that I want to see, my brothers and sisters keep their jobs with protections because we are a vital role of the economy, as we've mentioned before.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't want it to devalue our nation's currency and just keep deep diving into more and more national debt that we're never going to get out of, which could be dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that can be the trifecta in all this, if there ever is one, is, we meaning the industry have benefited from very, very low fuel prices in the past few years. And, here we are suffering from a pandemic, which has brought us to our knees. Fuel prices are pretty much low right now, but, my biggest fear is we get over this pandemic, and with the new administration in place now and the way they're handling the energy solutions of our country, we may have another spike in the price of fuel, which has always been, an airline's biggest expense, labor and fuel. So, going into debt to keep everybody on staff, and then, going into debt to take these PSP loans, surviving the pandemic to be brought back to our knees because of labor and fuel costs is something that, if it happens, I wouldn't be surprised, but oh my God, I hope it doesn't,
So Rob, kind of speaking to that point right there. See that poster right over my shoulder there?
Yeah, I do.
All the different airlines. With what you're sort of alluding to, and everybody thinks I'm crazy, that thing may have to be reworked, because I think that possibly longer term force some sort of, merger 2.0. I mean, I think I've said it before on this podcast that I don't think merger mania is done yet. I still think that there's going to be another round of that. And like I said, I mean, that, who knows, that could all be reworked over there in time. So,
and a couple airlines just formed alliances, lately. We all know that JetBlue and American are doing something together on the East Coast. I know something's going on the West Coast with Alaskan Airlines. Not to say that that's what's going to happen, but
sure.
There's some interesting moves taking place right now, and I'm sure it's going on behind closed doors at some other major network or major legacy carrier out there. So, yeah.
And what's the point of all this? The only reason I wanted to mention what's going on with the warn letters and this, CARES 3.0, which it looks like it's going to go through. Their positive news has been coming from the negative news that came only hours before. That was followed by some more positive news with the news that airlines were being hired. This whipsaw is it's absolutely exhausting for anybody that's in the career and that it affects. Now, Rob, earlier you mentioned you flew with a captain, 30 years on the flight line. It doesn't affect them. You can ask him a question about it, what he thinks or what she thinks, and you're going to get a response, well, I really haven't been following it. I don't know. Which there's no, fault for that. I mean, that's his or her prerogative. But I truly believe that when you're in an industry, in a particular niche that we are in aviation, as small as it is, regardless if you're an airline pilot, a corporate pilot, a cargo pilot, if you have wings pinned on your breast as you walk out the door in uniform or not, or you just have wings in a virtual sense and you're flying a private operator, either way, this is your industry and it affects you. And if your son or daughter were a new hire and this was affecting, I guarantee you'd be paying attention to what's going on and how it's going to affect their livelihood and their quality of life. So I'm not saying is that you have to, be all in to find out if this doesn't affect you, but it really is the responsible and really respectful thing to do is to at least pay attention.
Yeah. And you jarred my memory just now when you said that the captain I flew with this past weekend, who I told you he really didn't pay too much attention to it. And I guess I should rephrase that. He just didn't know that it was happening, currently, that the warning letters were going out. He does have a daughter that is a flight attendant who was furloughed or is furloughed, and is living at his house back again, 30 years old. I mean, there's a lot of detail, but he did talk about, how she misses flying, and she hopes that she can get back in the air soon, and with everything that's going on, that.
So.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Rob. Sorry.
No, good. That's good. I was just saying. That was it, pretty much.
So a couple things I'll add with that. I'll start off with this. Actually, a few things. So, talking about, someone that basically loses this job, I mean, that's never an easy thing to go through, period. Whether or not you have recall rights or you don't, it's never an easy thing to go through. But particularly in this job where the job really becomes, your life. Okay. It really kind of becomes, an embodiment of who you are. This is, it's more than a job. It's a lifestyle for people. So there's that aspect of it too. But I think that to take that a step further and look at it in the aggregate, one of the worst things I think that's happened here with COVID is the fact that, okay, look, obviously people have died. Mind you, I said one of the worst things here. Okay. But it's the fact that, people have lost purpose. They've had purpose taken away from them, whether it's, you've been furloughed as an airline employee or anything. When you take that purpose away from people, you have nothing to do. That is a real emotionally devastating thing to have to contend with. Now, and the second factor, the second aspect of that too is, where we're looking at a lot of the more senior people. I think that from the emotional perspective, they're looking at it in the sense that I'm well insulated enough that I don't have to worry about being furloughed. I've got another couple of years left to go. Worst case, if things went totally south, I know from this point on, I'm basically coasting in. I'm okay. And I think that there's very much an element of that, a little bit of disengagement, which I can understand on the behalf of like the more senior people who are kind of short timing it towards retirement. And Tony, you had also brought up another point, which this subject sort of reminds me, of something else, and particularly, where you make it relative to, to airlines. But you sort of what you had said about think about it if it were your daughter, you might feel differently about it too. Just I guess more in a more aggregate sense, it is going off into a little bit of a tangent conversation. On a level playing field, when things are going good with the airlines, you hear people all the time, talk about, I can't believe the ticket prices went up and, and so this isn't fair and it shouldn't cost this much. And I should be able to fly here and there for, super short money. It's like, well, okay, think about it like this, then I'm just gonna make up an arbitrary example. Say if that's somebody who happens to work for one of the cell phone providers or something like that, I could very easily have the position of, my cell phone bill should be a lot less expensive, but whose expense is that going to be at too at the same time? We're all in this together. When it comes down to affecting you, people will always look at that a little bit differently. And I think that, Tony, that's an element of that you sort of reminded me of, because that's something that I've always kind of felt as well.
Yeah, and one thing we talked about, though, I remember a conversation I did have with the captain, and now that we're talking about it more, it's jarring my memory of the conversations we had. But one of the things we talked about too is, this is probably a conversation for another time. But anyway, from the flight attendant side of the house, the furloughs, all the flight attendants that were furloughed were pretty much the new hires from like 2013 and on.
Right.
And those are all like the fresh new faces, the young ones right out of college or high school, whatever the case may be. And, I don't think that those, I'm sure there was a lot of them that did, but I think most of those individuals looked at this, position that they now have as just a job, as opposed to how we look at it as a career, something we really have. I mean, obviously they had to go through a training program that is, we've all heard that it's really tough. And it's really, they're held to a really high standard to get certified and everything. But it's still, when I think some of them got the news that they were getting furloughed, a lot of them are just like, all right, well, I'll go do something else. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of them are upset. I did see some emotion from a lot of people because, like Anthony said, that's a lifestyle. It's something that people look forward to do, and I think those are some of the people that would turn this into a career for themselves. But from that point of view, it's just a job for most of them, and the ones that have been here for 20 years, 30 years, and, there's one that are back on reserve again, their career-wise, their careers, this is a career for them. Pilots, it's a career. It's not a job. I mean, there's very few people that treat this like just a job. And the ones that do the ones that just treat it as a job probably have something else going on, second job or something else that they're more passionate about. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents, and remember that from our conversation.
Yeah, we have years of training and training expenses, years behind this. So if we are out of work, we can't just go and pick up and go, well, I was working for A, I'm just going to go work for B and pick up where I left off. No, if A is doing poorly, B is doing poorly, C is doing poorly, all the other airlines are doing poorly. So you have to get creative. And I know a lot of information boards and social media boards that are out there to help furloughed pilots right now. People are posting jobs up there all the time. Hey, I know a guy out, if you live out in this area, submit your application.
I was going to say, a lot of people don't realize that our industry isn't like other industries where, your years of experience carry over to your next job if you do happen to go to one. For us, we're a seniority-based industry, mainly, especially at all at the airline level. You leave one job or one company and you go to another, you start all the way at the bottom again, regardless of how many hours of experience you have. Even you look at the military guys pay scale and everything. You look at military guys who come out of the military with, some guys 5, 10, 15, 20,000 hours of flight experience. They start off at the airline. They're bottom of the totem pole. They're treated just, they're new hires. They're only there because they're qualified. That's it. So, anyway, with that being said, I don't think very many listeners may not know that. So it's not easy to just go from one airline to another airline or from one aviation job to another aviation job due to that aspect.
Yep. And we're gonna discuss a little bit about the mandatory vaccinations and an amazing aviator from our past right after the break.